I used to come walk around here when I was a little kid, very young, with my brothers and sister. Yeah, I don't know, it's just always found it quite an enchanting place, such kind of old woodland. It's quite rare around here, the Vale of York. It's all been flattened for agriculture. It's kind of a little oasis, really, when you're growing up in the suburbs. No ideas of being a woodworker then, but certainly always felt very special being in a place like this. No, it's beautiful. Some really nice oak here. Some really nice big old trees stood around. But I kind of can't help it when I walk through a place like this. I don't see the trees so much anymore. I do see legs and tabletops and actual components within it, This is the Lottie Inch Gallery, York. It's a beautiful little space. Lovely medieval building built onto the abbey walls, which is just beautiful. And normally every month there's a different show in here. It'll be ceramics, textiles, photography, anything. And this time it's furniture, and I've taken over the space entirely, which is a real joy, because pop-ups really are, for people like me who are self-employed. It's just one person doing the designing, the making, the paperwork, the accounting, everything. You can't have a shop. There's no way you can't do it, because you need to be in the workshop, you need to be making, or you need to be at your computer, or you need to be sat at the drawing board. And pop-ups are really the only way, to get your stuff out there visually to people, if you want to be there to sell it, to talk about it, to tell people how you make and why you make. And doing a pop-up like this really allows me to take that month to do it. And the second this pop-up's over, I'm straight back into the workshop and making again. Now, if I had a full-time shop, I just couldn't do that. You'd have to have such a huge amount of space, to have a workshop and a shop on the same premises. And for a new business, a new maker, that's not something that's really achievable. People have been stopping in the window constantly. People have been walking along and backing up, doing double takes. There's been a few cars in the traffic jam that have not set off when the lights have gone green, because they're staring through the window. It's a really nice thing, and I think it pulls a lot of people in as well. It's this is a kind of a street where people are kind of powering their way into town. They're in a rush, and people are stopping and they're thinking, it's something they don't see every day. It's nice. It's what I hope to achieve, and it seems to have worked really well so far. I'd say of the people that stop, I'd say 1 in 3 probably come in. And a lot of the time it's people just with questions, or I tell you what, a lot of the time it's people who'd say, "Oh, my grandfather used to be a furniture maker, he used to be a joiner, whatever." And people see the workbench through the window, and it just evokes in them like memories of I don't know, being at their grandparents when they're children, and seeing their granddad in his shed carving away at something or whatever, and that's a really nice thing. People are just generally interested. People want to know, how has it been successful? People want to ask those questions. It's great.
And have you actually sold much furniture?
Yeah, I've sold a lot of furniture. I've sold quite a bit of the furniture that's on display in the gallery, but more importantly, I've taken a lot of commissions and I now have a pretty lengthy waiting list, which is brilliant. So this 1 month pop-up so far, and I'm just over halfway through, has provided me work for the next 4 months.
Talking about that workbench, it's not your average carpenter's bench, is it?
No. It's, I may have got slightly carried away. Normally my benches are made of plywood, the bog standard pine you get from a builder's merchant. Nothing special, but does the job perfectly. This time, I knew I was doing the pop-up. And I'd been doing a lot of carving. And the thing about carving, as you can see, is I'm stood bent over. And when I'm doing that for an entire day, you soon start taking trips to the chiropractor. So I built this bench purely, really, initially to save my back. But it's a beautiful bench, so it's made from English sycamore, the frame, which is a lovely wood to work with. Not so commonly used because people tend to use maple, and sycamore is not so durable, it's a lot softer, but you know, it's a workbench. I found it. It actually has some nice figuring in it. Nice bit of flame going on. And the top is made from Paduk, which is again an extremely extravagant choice for the top of a workbench. Normally a workbench, you know, if you were going down the hardwood route and you were really making a long-lasting bench, it'd be made from beech. So what started as a carving bench has kind of become one of the main benches in the workshop. But yeah, also by far and away the most extravagant.
What kind of wood is Paduk?
So Paduk's an African hardwood. It almost has rosewood qualities, but it's a fascinating wood. So a lot of wood is affected by UV. Paduk actually oxidizes. So on the inside of this vice jaw here, you can see this vice is closed every night. It's only open when I'm working, and you can see on the inside the colour that it was, you know, when it was fresh. So this bench was made and polished, ready for finishing, and it was left for 3 to 4 weeks to oxidize, which really brought out a rich colour. It's a beautiful wood. I really want to work with it more, but it's not something that people commission very often because it is a very full-on timber, and when you see it when it's new, it's maybe a bit overwhelming. You think I couldn't have a piece of furniture made of that in my house, but it's also a funny one. It does settle down. It does go a beautiful kind of dark brown with like golden streaks, black streaks in it, and I can't wait to see what this looks like in a year or so. There's some really funky grain going on in it. A lot of the timber I'll buy will be square cut, rough sawn, but square cut. But when I'm working in oak or ash, I generally always get it with the live edge on. It's what we call in boule form, so a tree's just been sliced up, air dried, and that's how you buy it. And I kind of prefer it, really. A little bit more waste, but it helps with the timber selection process.
When you select your timber, what do you look for?
Many different things, and it kind of depends on what you're making. Certain things you'll want grains running in certain directions for stability, for strength, for aesthetics, how the grain appears. So I mean, it does really kind of depend, but generally what you're kind of looking for is really nice, clean, straight grain. You want a board that's ideally been air dried as opposed to kiln dried, and that's dried kind of nice and flat. It hasn't twisted too much. If you get a board with a lot of twist in it, you can be pretty sure once you start working with it that you're gonna have problems. That piece of wood, you're gonna make it thinner, and you're gonna relieve tension in certain areas, and the board's gonna carry on twisting. So you can take a pretty rough piece of timber, make it square, all looks good. You'll come back the next day and it'll be like a banana, and you'll be in a world of trouble. So yeah, there's a lot of things to bear in mind, but nice, clean, straight grain, not free, and kind of uniform in its colour, uniform in its appearance. So that entire piece of furniture, so it's going to be a big sideboard credenza that's going by the side of a dining table in a client's house. The entire thing is made from one tree, which is really nice, and I'd really like to try and do that whenever I can, because you kind of guarantee uniformity in the colour and the appearance of the grain and everything. And it's actually it was this is these are some of the offcuts from it, and again, this is the centre of the tree, which is why this hasn't been used for the flat panels. So these are the offcuts that I've used for making the frame and the narrow pieces like the legs. And again, what I've done is I've taken that wood from kind of this side. For aesthetic reasons on that, I've caught a bit of the dark wood just because that's what the customer wanted.
Can you show us on that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, what you've got here, this is the frame, yet to be levelled, but you've got the dark wood running down in the centre of the tree, and you can see the grain's kind of more cut because we're getting close to the centre of the tree there, and as you radiate out, the grain starts to run more square to the surface, and it's getting that pattern, that colour difference, which when it's finished will be much stronger. You'll notice it much more. But having it in here, in the rail here, and then also on the main body of the piece itself, we've got the dark strip running down the centre. It just ties it all together. I could have selected all the nice clean white timber on the quarter for this, and normally that is what I do, but it's much plainer in ash unless you find some very figured stuff. And the customer saw a piece that I'd made previously using kind of a real two-tone effect, and that was what he fell in love with. So I'm basically trying to replicate that feel on this piece, which is a very different piece, but same feel.
How do you go about designing something like that?
The design process really is drawing by hand rather than using computers, because when I draw by hand, it takes a really long time, and there's a lot of head scratching and a lot of thinking. But by the time I've got to the end of doing that drawing, I know how I'm going to make it. I know where the joint's going to be, how it's going to be actually put together. And when you draw on computers, it's easy to really quickly throw together a beautiful design without really having thought much about how you're going to make it and how kind of, well, loads of things, how strong it's going to be, you know, I don't know really. It's a much more kind of organic process. It's the same method of working as when I'm actually making the thing. It's just I'm drawing it rather than making it, and it just makes everything run so much smoother when I come to make this. So this was started at the start of this week. It's already in my head. I know exactly what I'm doing. It's figured out. So it speeds the process up once I start building, and kind of in this job, time really is money. You know, I can't be halfway through making something and suddenly thinking, oh God, I haven't thought about that. How is that going to work? And I lose a day just kind of scratching my head and having to go back and rethink things.
So what's that thing in the middle?
So it's just the little pod basically. So he's using it for display purposes. He's basically ornamental. It's going next to a dining table, and he has a specific kind of piece of sculpture that's you know, kind of fairly long, quite low, and he just wanted something to raise it up a little bit because there's going to be kind of a high vase in this section and another kind of taller piece in the other section, and this piece is quite low but it's quite important to him, so having just this little raised plinth just kind of brings it up. It makes that the centerpiece of the whole thing, and that's what's important about that design process and speaking to the client, but knowing exactly what it's going to be used for, because that will make all the difference when it's actually in situ and it's got the things in it.
How do you work out whether something is going to hold together in the way that you want it to?
Lots of practice. Well, really, it's a kind of a case of knowing the wood. It's a case of kind of knowing how the grain's working. This is a very heavy piece. This top section weighs an awful lot. There's still a little bit of thickness to come off. All the joints are yet to be cut on that. That's just placed together. But I just know I've got good surface area for glue joints. I've got good, really big spaces for really nice big mortise and tenons. It's going to be very, very strong, and kind of I know how the wood's going to react. There's always variables. It's a natural material, but you can be pretty damn sure that it's going to react how you think it's going to react. And it weighs a hell of a lot, but this frame that's going to be taking all that weight, all the weight's down these legs, and these legs are stood up the way a tree would be stood up, the grain's running up. Wood in compression in that way is incredibly strong. You know, think about the beams holding up buildings. You can put an enormous amount of weight on timber like this, and in here you have very big mortise. Basically on the end of this rail here we have a huge mortise that's cut into this leg, and the same with these little bits that go into the rail. There's a big mortise in the rail, and it coming in like this. You've just got a really, really strong joint, and you've got, if you imagine, you've got what we call the shoulder of the joint, which is the flat bit, then the mortise that comes out. You've got a huge surface area for glue, and that joint is incredibly strong. Yeah, I studied lutherie, and I did a degree in acoustic guitar making, which was brilliant fun. It's a great thing to do. Guitar making was like, it encompasses so many different woodworking skills: wood carving, marquetry, incredibly complex dovetail joints, and you know, there's so much to know in guitar making that kind of once you've learnt that, it really gives you a brilliant basis in kind of going forward into any kind of woodwork. But what was great about doing it as a degree in kind of that academic way is, you know, all the different modules you have to do. So material sciences, we're there kind of slicing up wood and looking at it through microscopes, really getting a really detailed knowledge of how wood works and why it acts the way it does. It's a great start. Yeah.
Have you got any of your guitars around here?
There will be. So yeah, this is, don't look too closely, I was still learning, but this is one of the first guitars I made. Well, no, it was the 5th guitar I made, and it's a Weizenborn. It's a lap steel guitar. It's designed for playing slide. You play it sat down, flat on your lap like that. The strings are raised up high, and you play it with a slide. But it was there was a lot of, like I was saying about the elements in guitar making. There was a lot on this, and it was very challenging at the time. I think this took about 3 months to make, but it's bird's eye maple, which is a beautiful wood, really nice, and that's book matched on the back, and on the sides it's the same. It's embellished with ebony, and then the front is flamed sycamore, which again, you know, it's more what you'd kind of associate with the back of a violin. Normally you'd never use a wood like sycamore on the front of a guitar, but the tension in the strings in one of these instruments is so strong, it sounds beautiful with sycamore. And then it's got black pearl, mother and pearl. One of the first. It's always good to look back and see where you went wrong.
Do you play?
I do, not as much as I should. But I started playing when I was probably 10, 11, something like that. And it's kind of what sent me into guitar building, I suppose, is that, you know, I always loved making stuff. I always loved building anything, whether it, you know, whatever it was, whether it was a bit of bricklaying going on outside, I'd be interested. And then, you know, throw that in with the music. It was kind of a natural progression, really. But interestingly, from doing the guitar building degree, you kind of, you know, you're immersed in music and woodwork. And for me, it was really the woodwork that was the thing that stuck out. Bottom line is that guitar making, it takes a very long time. You're using very expensive materials. It's a really time-consuming process, as is furniture. But at the end of the day, you have to sell these things. You've got to make them and sell them, and you've got to make a living. You know, you need to make minimum wage at best, and it's really difficult to do that in guitar making. The market's obviously nowhere near as big as it is for furniture. Sure, like a lot of people play guitar. I think guitar is probably the most numerous instrument in the entire world, but the amount of people wanting to spend thousands of pounds on a custom-made bespoke instrument are few and far between. Furniture is different. There's you know, it's much more of a market for it. And there's also another kind of thing about it that kind of drew me to furniture, and it's that guitars can be so ornately decorated. They can be beautiful things. They, you know, there's kind of a lot you can do with them, but it's always within those parameters of it being a guitar. It has to be played. It has to you know, there's always a certain form, a certain shape. You're kind of restricted by what a guitar is. With furniture, there's kind of really no restrictions. You can be as sculptural as you want. You can make anything.